Pintail. I don't know how many people are in there.
52. You ready, Thomas? What is that?
You're up on YouTube.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. First of all, tonight we have a called meeting. And you received information about that in your packet. The agenda came along with the packet. Can you hear us, Mr. Tucker?
I certainly can.
Okay. Do you have some?
Yeah, there are some things, Mr. Mayor, that I need to make a motion that we add to the agenda. At this time, I make a motion that we consider the following. A grant application to the Allegheny Foundation, performance agreement, to sign an option and donation agreement, to execute a deed to the Allegheny Covington Industrial Development Authority, and to execute support agreement to Covington Allegheny Industrial Development Authority.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we have on the call meeting agenda is to consider a resolution 2110 to the Sheriff of Allegheny County for additional funding for the jail inmate housing in the amount of $546.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
How much have we already paid to the jail?
Lord, I don't know, Alan. Whatever we appropriate, gone.
Is it gone? This is
Pretty
extra
close.
on
It's
top of
pretty-
that?
Yeah, that's on top of what we've already appropriated.
Correct. Councilman Tucker, one of the issues that we've had is the high population at the jail. With the current jail here, our regional Allegheny jail, being overcrowded, and then also the cost of continually having those that would be housed at the jail being housed elsewhere. So we are in the process of assessing that and looking at alternatives and options with other localities, as well as here locally. But in order to make it to the end of the fiscal year, this is what's projected as needed for our portion of inmate housing. The county appropriated some $245,000 last month to cover their end.
Okay, another question too. I understand the county is looking with Rockbridge to form another regional jail. Are we going to be included in that or not?
Councilman Tucker, there have been discussions, but it is too premature for us to divulge anything else. But I will say I've been working with Mr. Lanford extensively on looking at options.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, there was some additional non-covered COVID costs too that they experienced in the jail, along with some increased costs for the housing of the inmates. So he's probably got close to 100 inmates farmed out right now in other jails around the state, not counting what he's got over here.
Okay, did we receive any of those COVID funds to be utilized for the city?
We did, not to cover the costs that he experienced that were outside of normal COVID costs.
Okay,
But
Thank you.
we did receive COVID funding. Is that what you're asking?
yes, if we received any, for the city to be applied towards the jail.
The city received its share. I will say all of the retrofitting that is being done at the jail and courthouse is being covered by the county graciously.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any idea how many inmates that Covington has in there?
We get a monthly number, and we are working to more closely track that. So when I get those reports, I can send them to you all.
It's usually disproportionate to the number of inmates. We usually have more inmates than our
We
share.
usually do have more than the county.
But I think one other time we had got into this, that they're using the zip code,
Yeah,
and zip code is part in the county too.
right. I think they got
So
that
why are
straight
we,
now.
yeah,
They got that straight.
oh, they did?
Yeah.
Okay.
This allocation portion is based off of just the traditional, the 60-40 model that has been sort of the unspoken agreement in place. And essentially, right now, the sheriff's office is coming to you all, asking for this appropriation rather than the city getting the fifth bill, because we set up that special fund. So this is what's needed to cover the gap based on the current trends in inmate housing populations.
Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Scott, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Or,
Mr. Tucker?
Four.
Vice Mayor Crozier?
4.
Mayor Sabo?
4. Council members, I think each of you, probably not Mr. Tucker, have a list of the additional agenda items. The first is the Project Sparkle, and that is to authorize the city manager to submit grant applications to the Allegheny Foundation. This is some of the downtown revitalization planning and programming, and the foundation is interested in helping us.
So you all have a copy of the application and the resolution prepared. This is all the items that we've been discussing the last few months in closed session relating to Main Street. Nothing's changed, just giving you the authorization to submit the application by you all. And then we'll see where the chips fall from there. I will say that on Friday, the IDA is meeting, and they will be looking to adopt a similar resolution to submit a grant as well. Still trying to open yours.
take the look.
Tell you what, I didn't know I needed a chainsaw.
Didn't know they didn't want us to get in there all the way.
She wanted it to be a surprise.
It is. So, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Now, are there any questions or discussions before we go forward? It's got the amounts, everything's listed there for you. Projected costs of the total project, amount requested. So the motion is to move forward with an application to the Allegheny Foundation. Lance made the motion, David seconded it. No more questions or discussion. Could we have a roll call? Ms. Scott?
4.
Mr. Hunter?
Or,
Mr. Tucker?
Four.
Vice Mayor Crozier?
4.
Mayor Sabo?
4. And then you have another packet about Project Rivermont and landmark housing development. Huh?
You want me to kind of go over some of these?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Absolutely. So, the primary thing that you all may want to be concerned with is in order for Landmark Development to submit their application for the tax credits to Virginia Housing Development Authority, we actually have to ensure that the property is transferred to the Industrial Development Authority in advance of the application. So there is the, support agreement and the deed to transfer the property to the IDA. And then there's a performance agreement related to the amount of time the developer would have to then take ownership of the property after securing grant funds, as well as an option and donation agreement that the city is providing the option of donating it to the IDA, and then the option agreement for the developer to pull it down from the IDA. It is structured in that should we not get the grant this year, if the developer is not successful in their application, because we did have some difficulties with obtaining some project-based vouchers, that we will reapply then next year. And that is why it is structured out to December 2023, because then that gives them, if they are awarded next year in 2022, a year to get everything in order to break ground with financing and all of that. Our city attorney, Mr. Popovich, and our assistant city attorney, Mike Lockaby, have worked extensively on these documents, and they have all been reviewed by the attorney for the IDA as well, and the chair of the IDA. These will also be going to the IDA on Friday.
Do we need to have a motion on each bullet point?
This is for the, Old People's property, correct?
that was-
No,
that
we're
was the
talking
last-
about Rivermont School.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, well, I have a question. Do we need to rezone that as R4 because of apartments?
No, sir, it's already zoned properly. We've certified the zoning compliance as part of the grant application.
Okay, thank you.
I would suggest a motion to authorize the city manager to execute any and all agreements, deeds, and other documents related to the Rivermont property.
I'll make a motion of what he just said.
And then you cover everything.
Second.
The motion
the grant
covers all the
application.
bullet points.
Yeah.
So I would make sure that you specify that it's for the grant application for.
It is, the grant
Rivermont.
application is included in those.
Yes.
Well, for Rivermont. You
For
know, that
Rivermont, yeah.
anything that they need to get the grant application done, because
Right.
I'm sure we'll come back to you guys with additional stuff after grant award, if it's awarded.
Yes, ma'am. So we had a motion, do we have a second?
Yeah, Tucker did.
Have we got any other questions or comments? Ms. Scott, could you do the roll call for this one, please?
Mr. Carson,
4.
Mr. Hunter,
Four.
Mr. Tucker,
4.
Vice Mayor Crozier,
4.
Mayor Sabo.
4. Is there anything else we need to do in the call meeting? That cover everything? Tell you what, we ain't got near enough papers, have we? Okay, with all that said and done in the called meeting, we'll start the regular work session. And that's with a call to order, and I need a motion to approve the agenda for the work session.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That brings us to citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments?
Wilson.
Bill, our typical citizens' comment section allows 3 minutes for each person. I'll cheat that a little bit one way or the other if you need me to. Okay.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, happy to see all of you. I know every one of you, and I've known you for a long time, and I thank you for what you do, except I'm here tonight to fuss at you a little bit about the Maple Avenue project. Goes back a ways. I got a letter, and I think the other businesses on Maple Avenue got the same letter back in late August, early September of last year. And the letter said the project was going to take place and that we would be kept in touch, advised of what was going on. Well, I'm sad to say that was the last I heard of that. I don't recall anybody coming to me or my office and bringing me up to date or talking to me about problems or anything else. What I've learned is from walking across the street to Donna Craft's restaurant, and I can't speak for Donna, but I think it's fair to say she's not happy about the delay. But I thought when the project started that it was going to be a good thing. I thought it was going to be a big improvement, very much like what took place up in the adjacent block. And I'm sure when it's finished that it will be an asset. It'll probably be a much nicer looking block. And I'm looking forward to that. But the trouble is that for me, and I suspect this is true for Dr. Wheeler's office and Allegheny Floral Boutique, I think it's true of Granbury Church. I think David, you and Alan know something about that. And I think it's probably true, as I said, for Donna. But I'm in the middle of the block. And if you go there right now, if you walk down to Maple Avenue, and I invite you to do that, you'll see a massive backhoe blocking the alley between the church and my office. That's been there for a long time. And before the backhoe arrived, there was a huge hole. You could have put an elephant in it. And it stayed there for the longest kind of time. And the streets are blocked, as I'm sure you know, at Main Street and at Locust Street. And I think, Mr. Mayor, I may have been talking to you, and I was fussing because I said the only way my clients can get into my office is through the back door, and that they have to know to go around to Locust Street and come up into the back of my office. Well, the very next morning, I arrived at my office, and I tried to come up Locust Street, and it was blocked. Now, that didn't last long, but it's kind of symbolic of what's happened. So my thought is, I've done a lot of contracts in my time. I do basically plaintiff's personal injury work now, but I've done a lot of contracts in my time. And I would have thought that at the very beginning of this project, which was kind of in the middle of the pandemic, I hope it was the middle of the pandemic.
Close, yeah. Yeah, I hope so too.
But I would have thought that you'd have a pretty ironclad contract that would say when the project started, what the work would be, and when it would be completed. And if there were any delays, there'd be penalties and the usual contractual language. I think Mr. Popovich knows how that works. And I don't know. I've never seen the contract. I don't know what it says. I know we've got a local contractor. And I walked out the other day, which I do practically every morning, and I look at the big backhoe and I look at the no entry sign. And I was talking to one of the workmen, and he said, well, it's not my fault. He said, I'm working 2 jobs and I can't help it. Don't blame me. And I said, well, I don't know who to blame. All I know is that you have shut my office down virtually for 6 months. And he said, well, we're not going to be able. That was another blow. I walked out a couple of days ago, and there was a man there from Dominion Energy. And I hope I didn't sound rude, but I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm marking these telephone poles because we're going to take them all down and we're going to put the lines underground. And I thought, how long is that going to take? So you've got the main contractor, he says, I'm not going to be out till April. You've got Dominion Energy, and how long is it going to take all those poles down and put those lines underground? And it's just that I don't know. Now, I want you to know I've thought about suing the city. I've thought about it. And people are urging me to do that. And if I do it, I think I'd win. But as I stand here, I don't plan to do that. It's my city. I've been practicing law in this community for 57 years. That's longer than most of you have been alive. And I'm not anxious to come to blows with my own city. The city ought to be looking out for me. I pay taxes, a bunch of them. And I belong to the Chamber of Commerce. I do all that stuff, been doing it for years. But no one's coming to me and saying anything more than, we're so sorry. You know, it's unfortunate. You know, we're so sorry. But that's all I get. Now, if you did this to Main Street, you're talking about the Main Street. I heard Ms. Onassis talking about the Main Street and the grant and that sort of thing. Well, that's all wonderful. But suppose you had done the same thing to Main Street that you've done to me and the other businesses on Maple Avenue. What do you think would have happened? You know, what do you think would have happened? I mean, they wouldn't have stood for it. Those businesses wouldn't have stood for it. You can't close a business down for 6 months, and now you're talking about 7, 8 months or more. I don't know. You know, all I want you to do is take this thing really, really seriously. And look at your contract. Look at your contractor. If the contractor's doing the job, I heard that they had to re-pour the concrete. I heard that out on the street. I didn't hear it from anybody here. I heard it down on the street that the concrete was not poured properly. They had to go back and redo it. You went over in front of Granbury Church, and Mr. Crozier knows, Mr. Tucker knows, and I think Mr. Mayor, you know. And you took the handicap ramp out. Our church is largely made up of elderly people, many of them crippled. And they drove up there for years and used that handicap ramp to come into church. Now that's gone. No discussion, no debate that I know of. Maybe somebody made a communication, I don't know. But not that I know of. You just took it. So I wasn't hired to represent anybody. I'm just a member of that church. So I tried to get I was told, you get in touch with VDOT, the rules, the handicap rules. I got in touch with VDOT. They told me the call is up to the city. Now, you all are important people, and you can do important things. You ought to be able to get that ramp back for those older people in front of the church. They now have to come off of Main Street and work their way somehow up into the church. It's just an unnecessary imposition. And I know in my letter that I gave you, each of you has it, I say things maybe a little too firmly sometimes. And I said you're callous. I don't like to use that word. You're public servants. you're not getting paid much. You're doing a service for the community. But you can't do what you've done on Maple Avenue to the businesses there and to the church. You got to treat it like an emergency. You got to deal with it hard up front and figure out what you're gonna do. I've got, I don't know how many clients, but they are mostly victims of wrecks. They've been in wrecks of some kind. Most of them are crippled up. Many of them have walkers. Many of them have crutches. They got to figure out somehow, some way to find the office and get in the door. New clients is another situation. Out of sight, out of mind. They can't see my office. They can't see my sign. So, you know, what do you do? So I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you. I don't like to talk to you this way, and I think you all know that. But I want you to take this thing seriously, and I want you to jump on it, and I want you to do what's necessary. If you've got contract problems, you know, deal with them. Deal them with first. You got Mr. Popovich here. He's an excellent lawyer, and he can help you with that. But for goodness sakes, get on the stick and take care of business.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I
Mayor.
gave you 3 extra minutes, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I owe you.
All right, I'm gonna remember that too.
Bill him.
All right. I done lost my agenda.
Appointments.
Yeah, appointments.
Well, we got, to consider appointments to 3 different boards. You had in your packet a list of people that were coming off, and you had some information there about people that were willing to continue to serve. We have to consider appointment to the Planning Commission, which is, who's the?
Jerry.
Jerry, he's willing to serve again. Jerry's been on there for a long time. I think he's vice chairman, or is he usually the vice chairman?
Not now.
He's not.
He used to be.
We have an appointment to, we have 2 appointments to consider to the Redevelopment and Housing Authority. One of those is Lance's, and one of them is Burt Baker's. His term's up the end of this month. And then to consider an appointment to the Industrial Development Authority, which is Brian Thompson's appointment. He's eligible to be reappointed this time. Ms. Scott, did you have anybody make any reference to any of these other than the people that were already serving? There was nobody came along and said, I want to do that, or
No, sir.
you didn't advertise in the paper, did you?
No, sir.
Well, we both run the ad in the paper, maybe Saturday, see if anybody shows up, just to give us a choice if we need one.
Okay, for all 3 boards?
It wouldn't hurt. I mean, if
Yeah, I don't think it hurt anything to just do all 3, but then we'll, we've got people that are willing to fill most of these positions. I think one on the, let's see,
Yeah, we got somebody for
we got
everybody.
somebody for each seat that's
Isn't-
willing.
Isn't Bert gonna continue?
Yeah, Bert said
Wants
he
to-
would, yeah.
Bert wants to be reappointed. Bert, Don Riddle, Jerry Morgan,
And Brian.
and
Brian Thompson. It's,
Yeah.
let's run an
Brian
ad
Thompson.
if you can Saturday and just see what happens.
Move to approve all of them.
So we just, we'll address that next.
We'll put them on the agenda.
Yeah, just put it on the agenda for next Tuesday. Thank gone, Crystal left. Her turn. We're gonna do a presentation on the recycling program, and there was a survey that, were you ready to do that?
Yes, sir.
Good.
As you all know, we, as a city, put out a recycling program to assess the overall satisfaction as we have a new program. There's been some wins, there's been some challenges. So wanted to highlight the results of the survey and some key takeaways. and invite some opportunity for discussion and questions. So, key takeaways of the recycling survey. We had 129 responses. Average time spent was about 2 minutes. Survey was active from January 14th through February 5th. We actually left it up an extra day. Overall, the responses tended to aggregate into 2 types of satisfaction. Most rating experiences as neutral with the program, neither loved nor hated it, but in middle of the road, or that they were dissatisfied through the varying questions that we had out. However, there's a strong community commitment that was evident in the responses based on most folks said that they've been recycling in excess of 2 years. Most folks are indicating that they are following the guidelines of what is the acceptable materials that we put in as far as for collection, and the frequency of use and desire to continue using the bins or having a program in of itself. Accessibility was rated as average, and most also really cited the need for additional collections, which kind of takes us to our next slide. Some additional key takeaways. The volume and demand for service has outpaced our ability to meet service demand with the current program in place. Excuse me, I think that's cat hair, sorry. Okay, cat. Random, right? There was not consistent tonnage data on recycling prior to us switching service providers. That was one of our challenges. As you know, we were working to provide a service, and there were some service delivery challenges before, as well as some lack of data. To date, since October, when we rolled out the program with RDS, we've collected over 36.49 tons. As you all will remember, when we had a brief discussion on this in January, we were at just a little over 22 tons. So in a month, we're averaging anywhere between 11 to 14 tons of recyclables. We have not seen a large penalty amount that gets assessed for when you have hazardous materials or non-acceptable materials. So by and large, folks are actually sticking to the script of what's able to be put in the bins or what they're choosing to leave around the bins, which is strongly discouraged. The city has 4 bins. We have 2 at Casey Field and 2 at the former Edgemont Elementary School. So as I've mentioned, the current service demand is overtaking, and I think it's important to emphasize that, overtaking the budget allocation for all of recycling at this time. As a result, there's a need from you all as council to have a discussion prior to our upcoming really final formulation of budget to provide some guidance to the city administration on what is the path forward that you would like to look at. We're trying to assess some options and provide some formal recommendations to council, but I think ultimately getting some guidance from you all would be important. Currently, city administration has looked at some cost feasibility measures, which has included adjusting some of the collections and how we're using some in-house resources to manage what is around the bins. That is not a sustainable measure. One, because of the sheer volume of what is the recycling tonnage, and 2, we have more needs for service that are going, that can be shortchanged. Secondly, we've also looked at some other service options. If we're gonna be moving to a potential fee for service, other things like that, what are some program options that are more citizen-friendly and more convenient? So, wanting to lay that out. Beyond that, here are the actual survey questions and the responses as bar charts, because I know you guys like visuals.
Oh, yes.
So, first question we asked was, how long have you been recycling in the city? Roughly 80% of the respondents almost said more than 2 years. Few said they don't recycle. Which of the following items do you bring to the City of Covington's recycling program most often? And we asked folks to select all that apply. By and large, what we are getting most of is paper products, plastics, and some aluminum. But our plastics are leading at just about 85%. Paper products are just behind that. Other is, anything where, someone may be just throwing in something and they're not categorizing it, or it could be, they're just putting whatever they want there. We have not had that much of an issue. And again, this is out of 129 responses. Overall, how satisfied are you with the City of Covington's recycling program? And this is where it goes back to where I was mentioning that the rate of satisfaction kind of centered in neutral to then either dissatisfied. So as you can see, most folks either said they were somewhat satisfied or not satisfied at all. That's where the responses tended to cluster. So you've got about a little over 30% saying they're somewhat satisfied and 30% not satisfied at all. So they're kind of neck and neck. We also asked, how well does our new recycling program meet your needs? So this was kind of all over the places. Most folks were neutral and not so well, which is, you know, it is what it is kind of aspect, and then not well at all. So again, it goes back to that concept of we're getting it done, but we're not meeting the mark of the expectation for service delivery or what citizens and businesses would like to see. How would you rate the quality of our new program, which began in October 2020? So again, this is a satisfaction-oriented question. Again, grouping around the neutral response as well as the dissatisfied response. So you had about 35 to 37% saying that it was neither high quality nor low quality. It is what it is. And then you had about 30% exactly that said very low quality. I would guess to say that's also, you know, a lot of the calls and concerns we get shared about the overflowing bins. Because that is a challenge and it is frustrating when you do come with your recyclables and you're faced with, do I leave it and participate in illegal dumping, or do I ride around with it in the back of my car, take it back home, or throw it away? One other question we really wanted to focus on was how do you rate the accessibility of the recycling drop-off sites? Now, these tended to be positive, which that's nice. The Casey Field bin tends to be very popular, as I'm sure you all on council have noted, and so we got some above average ratings at about 22% saying it was above average, about 35% saying it was average, and about 13 to 15% saying excellent. So folks are at least pleased with the accessibility of the bins. We also asked what was the biggest concern with the new program. One of the things that we wanted to figure out was just, you know, is it just that we don't have enough bins, not enough collections? Where are we missing the mark? So the overwhelmingly response was about 78% said not enough collections. I will say that the collections are very costly. They're about $2,100 per collection. So when you have 4 bins.
Is that all 4?
Nope. $2,100 per bin, which is also why, and then there's the hauling fee and other things, so that's why the bins, each bin has a, you know, sibling bin to then reduce the cost for driving around and everything, because then they treat it as a separate site. So the concern is not enough collections. It was not ranked very high of use by non-city residents. That kind of came in at about 13% to 15%. And then, you know, the illegal dumping was neck and neck with that, with, you know, the outside use of non-city residents or businesses, and then the illegal dumping. And we also did get some feedback, you know, about 25% of the respondents out of 129 recommending that we spread out the locations. But again, the biggest thing was not enough collections.
Hey, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I don't think I understood the cost. It's $2,100 per site, or $2,100
Per site, per
bin?
haul. Per site, per haul.
Per haul.
Per site, per haul. So that's why we have the bins grouped. So if they're coming twice a week, then you're paying that $2,100 twice a week per site. So you have a site at Casey Field, and you have a site at Edgemont.
$8,400 a week to empty those bins?
Well, do not quote me on the $2,100, but I do believe that because I have the figure upstairs in my desk. I can run and grab it, or have my chief grab it if you'd like.
That's all right.
That's a lot of money.
If it's even close to that, it's too much.
It has gotten that way because of the need for the 4 bins and the twice weekly hauls. Because we have also gotten out of line with the hauls that are occurring in Clifton, so they're actually coming out here for special trip, if that makes sense.
It does.
Does that make sense? So it's almost like an on-demand pickup that they're treating it as. We also asked how many times in a week do you usually visit one of our drop-off locations? by and large, you know, a little over 50%, most are coming once a week, which is your typical recycling kind of rotation. Small majority of folks said 2 to 3 times a week. And then, you know, you got about 8% that say not at all. When we asked how likely are you continue to recycle given our new program, again, positive responses on that, indicating that people are interested and do desire to recycle. So folks are overwhelmingly very likely to continue recycling using our new program. I think that the key is just trying to figure out for us as a city what fits and meets the service need. And the last question we asked was, how far do you usually transport your recyclables to get them to our drop-off locations? By and large, most people are saying a little. That was 50% of the 129 responses. And then you had about 33% saying a moderate amount. Only a sliver were saying a great deal, and you know, then just slightly above a lot. So again, this is subjective. Anyone could have put down what they wanted, but by and large, most folks are indicating that, you know, they're not traveling a great distance to participate in our recycling program. So then I would like to open it up for discussion and questions from you all, or if there's other specific information that you would like city administration to come back with to then have a further discussion, whether it's cost, additional tonnage stuff, those kinds of things, happy to do that.
I've got a lot to say.
I know.
I hope I don't say it all tonight, but I'm
Yeah,
gonna get on
please
a roll.
don't.
You know, I'm disappointed in the way this has played out. We worked hard to try to help JRE to continue to service the clients that they served. We started probably more than 2 years ago. Richard Douglas was still city manager when we started meeting. We met with them, we met with their board, we met with the county, we met with Clifton Forge, we met with Iron Gate. We tried to work out something that was amicable to them, for them to be able to continue what they were doing. Nothing we suggested suited, so they just kept doing what they were doing, and they kept going in the hole.
And that was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, right.
Yes,
So
but
they-
I do believe there was 10 years of no profit.
And no profits whatsoever. Recycling is not profitable. There's no way to make money off of it. You know, I'm thinking that 8,400 a week is probably a high number, but that's just what I ran through my head. If it's 5,000 a week, it's high. We're going to have to either find a way to offset the cost of recycling, or we need to do away with our recycling program. Lexington did away with theirs over a year ago. Plastics aren't selling. Paper, cardboard will sell a little bit. Aluminum does okay. Glass doesn't sell anymore. You know, there's so many things that there's just no market for.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to, at some point, we've got to, what's the prudent thing to do? Do we do away with it? Do we add an extra tax? I know the county last year, I think they put a $60 charge on their real estate bill to cover some of the cost of their transfer station. You know, we could do something like that, or people willing, you know, I'm a recycler. You know, I've been recycling for years. I don't know how much I'm willing to pay.
So,
You'd have to add to the water and wastewater and solid waste, that, whatever it is, and maybe $1 or something like that for it in order to make this break even.
I don't think $1
Councilman
touch
Tucker,
it.
$1 would not cover it. Would it please council that potentially city administration would take the next 2 months to do a feasibility analysis, and in the midst of that, just implement some cost control measures with the program and come back to you all with options and recommendations for you all to include as part of the budget, that we could, you know, I would say we could have it by next meeting, but with everything we have going on with budget, with procurement stuff, with just general city business, giving us some time in-house to really assess what other localities have done or what going rates are. Would that be something that you all would want us to do?
Yeah. I know that Roanoke County has supplemented the company that we're using. They're not making a profit.
No.
The local governments that they work for are starting to supplement them. Roanoke County gave them $500,000 last year, I think. Don't quote me on that.
We've also looked into program alternatives, like I had mentioned, whether something like curbside recycling would be feasible through a third party, if we were going to look at fees. So
Yeah.
then it is a fee, truly a fee for service. Typically, those do get tacked onto your utility bill, and it's as soon as you establish your utility account, it's just like refuse, you're paying the refuse. There are some service providers in the near West Virginia area that we've also looked into just for what their rates are, how things are done there, and having some additional time to then come back with some recommendations or some cost options, given the service, would probably help us have a better informed discussion.
Yeah. Just to throw some numbers out there, if you are paying $5,000 a week to recycle, that's $250,000 a year. That's 10 cents on our real estate tax. I'd say people are ready to quit recycling before they want to pay another dime on the real estate tax.
Would not argue with that assertion.
We need to find out what we can do.
Question. If we do away with recycle, and that goes to the landfill, how much quicker will we fill up at the landfill?
It's, what was it, 20 ton a month? How many ton a month?
If we are successful in getting our waiver for the additional tonnage, which we're still going through that process of the 75 tons, that shaves off potentially about 3 years of the current cell. And we've also had some discussions about desire to move into a next cell, which is not advisable given regulatory costs and oversight measures. It could impact your overall cell utilization with the compact rate, with the space, the airspace is what they call it. But I don't think that it would be significant. However, I would want to look into whether DEQ, for us as a region, what their diversion rate is, because there are federal mandates that state for different localities and regions what the expectation is of landfill diversion rates or refuse diversion rates. I know previously we've relied on things like recycled asphalt, what West Rock does, and other things. So making sure that those guidelines aren't changing, or that we're meeting the mark on that, so that then we don't actually get dinged as a locality for not meeting recycling quotas that are already in place, if that makes sense.
In the last few years, recycled asphalt has met our quota,
Yes.
but I don't know if that'll continue.
I do not know. We're facing a lot of changing climate with DEQ, just with nutrient exchange that we purchase off of them for wastewater plant, or how permits are interpreted and other things. So I think it would be prudent for us to make sure what the current diversion rate is and what is being met at a regional level for that. And that would also be some important information to provide to you all for decision making.
David made a good point. I didn't let him finish, but when I was talking about we were meeting with them, that was pre-pandemic.
Long pre-pandemic.
So then when the pandemic started last March, most of their employees were high risk and were unable to work anymore. So the best I can understand, the majority of things going into that recycling location were going to the landfill from there. And, that's something that we have never talked about that. I didn't want to go out and try to stir up a big stink, but we've gotten thrown under the bus several times lately because of what we did to JRE.
The city was put in a position where it was paying for services not rendered, and
That's right.
legally, you all cannot pay for services not rendered. You all make a civic contribution to JRE, which did not change at all to their nonprofit entity. However, the fee-for-service aspect because there was no actual service delivery being met with consistent pickup or consistent recycling processing, was not something that as a locality you could continue to do.
But to reiterate what you said, and I think it was more like 3 years, that intergovernmental committee, it was you and,
Alan was on it.
you and Mr. Tucker, but it was the county,
like
it
four.
was Clifton
Alan
Forge,
says 4 years.
and it was a long time, and y'all worked, Thomas, can you turn these down a little bit? Worked a long time to try to find alternative sources of revenue for JRE.
Yes.
And I'm with you, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it's not like we didn't try ahead of time. And I'm sorry, but what we were paying to JRE, pulling that for the recycling portion of that, I'm sorry, if there wasn't already issues, was not enough to close them down. And this whole issue has, I'm glad you brought it up. I wasn't going to, but thank you. But that's where I'm at with it. Not only with, this thing goes back long before the pandemic. Y'all were trying for years to work with their board, day programs and other sources that they could get to booster what was lacking from the recycling. And then we get thrown under the bus because we go to another route of recycling. All of a sudden, it's our fault that the employees over there don't have a job now. And I resent that. As a parent of a handicapped child, I resent the fact that people think that this council was responsible solely for the closure of JRE. No, I'm good. I just had to get that out. Sorry.
Amen.
Any other discussion?
Dave took care of it.
So I guess the consensus would be that
Okay.
in May, at the work session, we could present some recommendations to have a clear path forward on how we will handle recycling and do all the due diligence with DEQ and look at some financial options. At that point, we can reassess.
Yes.
And in the meantime, we will have some cost control measures, which will actually now involve some in-house staff. So I will publicly say it here, if you go to any of our bins and they are full, please do not leave your items outside the bin, because we will then have city staff grabbing them, taking them, and actually taking it to the landfill. They will not be making it as a recyclable. So if you are at our bins and they are full, please wait a day, come back next week, do whatever you need to do, or just be comfortable with knowing that your intent to recycle will then end up in the landfill, because that is the reality that we have to have when the bins are overflowing and there's nowhere to shove them. They don't have a compactor in them. They end up at the landfill. Sorry. Just, that was my moment, my soapbox.
So that was your special presentation, was it?
Sorry, what?
That was your special presentation?
That
on
was
the
my
agenda?
special presentation and discussion.
Thank you.
It's nice, we all got to have a soapbox moment.
We have to put it on for next week.
Yep.
So, on the rest of the agenda, we have listed a public hearing, that's to be put on the agenda for next week.
Yes, sir.
The report of the city manager is for the agenda next week.
Yes.
Unfinished old business is ordinance 2103, amending and reenacting certain sections of the code. That's
Agenda.
Agenda.
To consider hearing a presentation from David Bryant, Director of Finance, on the quarterly financial report, and that'd be from October, November, and December, because he didn't get to do it in February.
Agenda.
Then to consider hearing a presentation from the treasurer on the quarterly financial statement.
Agenda.
Agenda.
New business for tonight. Anybody got any new business tonight?
I've said enough.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I believe there had been some discussion or inquiry made as to what would be necessary to allow council to take action at work sessions.
Yes.
your places, you should have, okay. I can tell you this. Very simply, there are two options on what you can do. Number one, your bylaws already allow that you can deviate from those rules given unanimous consent of council. So you wouldn't have to change anything in your bylaws. You would just have to take formal action on your own, and then allow yourself to vote at a work session. The alternative is what's been handed out to you, and that would be to make a formal amendment to your bylaws that would eliminate that last sentence that prohibits taking action and specifically authorize you to take any action as you deem necessary. So those are your two options on how you can proceed forward with that process. But I leave that completely up to you. It's your decision on how you all want to operate.
And the reason I'd ask about this is, we've had called meeting after called meeting during the work session, and the only reason we have to call a meeting is because we haven't been able to vote in work sessions in the past. And I wanted to know if there was a way we could change the code or the bylaws, I guess, as to how we can vote at a work session. One of the things I don't think we want to get into is voting on everything twice, and we don't need to discuss it beat to death 2 or 3 times. There will be certain times like tonight where we needed to have a called session to vote on the sheriff's budget addition. So we could do that if we had this set up this way. But I don't want to have it set up to where we take care of business every work session that should be taken care of during the regular session if we have time to do it, appropriate time frame. So that would be my reason for wanting to do that.
And that's why I suggest to you that the option of using what you currently have in your bylaws to deviate from your rules simply by majority vote or unanimous consent is your easiest option. So then if you feel that whatever is in front of you at the work session is important enough to move forward, you can just at that time make a motion to deviate from the rules and then act upon it as necessary. And then you don't have to have a called meeting.
I like that one.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I just wanted
I
a
am
way
too.
we didn't have to have a called meeting every time
Okay.
we had
All right, well, then we'll-
emergency business to take care
Yeah,
of.
we'll just make sure that we keep reminding you of that if happens to be an emergency item that comes up.
Okay.
So we can kind of dispense with having so many called meetings.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any other new business?
No, but you did skip the report of city manager.
You
I
said that was
thought we
next
put
week.
that on the agenda for next
Did
week.
you agenda it?
Yes, we
I
did.
missed
Would
it.
you like to do one?
No.
No, I did my report. I did enough reporting for the day.
It was advertised for tonight.
I just tried to
Public
move
hearing
things
was
along.
advertised?
I
CIS
know,
comes
I
on at
appreciate
8
it.
o'clock.
Hey, the public hearing was advertised for this evening.
It was?
Yeah.
For what?
The omnibus.
Omnibus.
The
Oh,
omnibus.
so you can act on that tonight.
Yeah, I missed that. That was my fault. I remember seeing that.
They said we had a public hearing scheduled for tonight.
Okay, then hold the public hearing
Then I'll make a motion, we deviate from the rules
from the, yes, from
to
your
conduct
bylaws.
this public hearing.
Well, actually, no, that, the public hearing was already scheduled.
Okay,
So the public hearing is something that you can have.
Okay.
It's if you want to go ahead and act on it tonight that you would
Okay.
have to deviate.
okay.
I was going down the list looking at what agenda items were, and I put that.
I
right
forgot
in
that I
there.
did see that advertised, that I should have done better, Mr. Mayor.
That's my fault.
Send me home till my attitude improves.
We can do that stuff next week.
We already advertised it for tonight,
It's not gonna take long. I don't think there's anybody here to speak.
unless Romy wants to say something.
We have a public hearing scheduled for tonight, and I'm gonna call that public hearing to order.
Oh, Lord.
Anybody like to speak for or against?
You wanna give us a little
Well,
overview of
Mr.
what
Mayor,
that
it's
is?
just for everyone's edification, the proposed ordinance revisions in front of you goes back to our overall review of city ordinances. And again, this is just minor technical revisions to eliminate references to specific fees and to simply make reference to the Covington Uniform Fee Schedule. Otherwise, there's really nothing else that these proposed revisions do.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we charging licenses for bicycles now again?
I
do not know the answer to
Because
that.
I think that's rather ridiculous.
Would that keep you from buying a bicycle?
I think the
You-
only fines we might charge for a bicycle is when someone rides it on the sidewalk, because don't they follow the
Isn't he talking
particular
about
laws
the
that are supposed to ride on the
mopeds?
Supposed to
sidewalk?
ride in the road.
They talk about
Yeah, you're supposed to ride the road, not the sidewalk.
Charge to ride a bicycle.
Okay.
Is it still listed
Do
in
they
the
have to
ordinance,
pay-
Alan?
The question is, do they have to pay a license?
Is it in the fee schedule that you're looking at?
I don't have a fee schedule for that. It just says bicycles and mopeds, and then it just talks about mopeds. It doesn't talk about bicycles.
Mopeds are different than a bicycle.
They have a motor on
Yes,
them.
they're motorized.
Right.
So for motorized vehicles, I would assume that that would remain.
Yeah, that remains. But the bicycles, I mean, back when I was a teenager,
Wow.
back when Caesar was around,
That's where we,
there was a small license fee for bicycles, and we had little old license plates we put underneath the seat.
that's right.
And, but we got rid of that, and I'm saying we don't have that many bicycles out there today, and I think that would be ridiculous to charge a license fee for it.
Well, Mr. Tucker, if that has been eliminated, it should not be something that comes back unless you as council vote to adopt a fee for it.
The chief
Okay,
got
could you
some-
check on it and see if it's still on the books?
The chief wants to talk about it.
If you don't mind, I believe what he's referring to is when the mopeds first initially started being allowed to use in the state of Virginia, there was no registration, there was nothing for the vehicles, it was up to the cities to register those mopeds. That was the way we would identify an owner of the vehicle, and there was a fee for it as well. I think the only reason bicycles are included is because of the definition of the moped, and bicycles were in that definition. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's why that's in there.
I know the definition of what a moped is has changed over time.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly,
No.
Mr. Tucker, the
Y'all speak up, please.
Mr. Tucker, the fact of the matter is we're getting ready to go into your budget cycle anyway. And
Right.
you will have to adopt a new uniform fee schedule at that time. So if that fee is still in place, you can certainly eliminate it at that time.
Okay, can you let us know, look that up and let us know if it's still in place?
I will see what I can figure out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Did you have anything else, Mark, you wanted to add?
Thank you, chief.
So do we have anybody who wants to speak for or against the ordinance? Well, we'll close the public hearing. Now, we'll put that on the agenda for next.
That
next
is
week.
under the ordinances and resolutions that we already put on the agenda.
Right,
Yeah,
okay,
that's set to go.
all right.
We're back on track.
Are we back down to new business?
Yes, sir.
There is in the code now, under animals, a
Oh,
section
leash.
that talks about dogs being restrained. Does not say with a leash, it just says restrained. I had a citizen contact me the other day, and he walks regularly in our community, and he said that he, was afraid he was gonna get bit the other day by an unrestrained dog. And he wanted to know if we could put some signs around, like at the parks and stuff, that dogs need to be on leashes, which I don't know that our code actually calls for it that way, but can we do something about that?
Mr. Popovich, the mayor and I discussed that potentially we could look at in public spaces, whether it's right away, sidewalk or city parks, requiring that animals do have a leash on them because it is a public space. What
Did
people
what we
do on
just-
private property is private property.
What we just do say actual leash?
No, it covered the tether length and,
Use the word
the
restraint?
shelter and other things. But we did discuss tether.
Okay.
That's different.
That's different.
That's the
That's where you tie a dog
responsible
over the
pet
backyard.
ownership,
Yeah.
and like you can only have but so
that's
many
On city
pets and
property,
now.
right?
Or, or right of ways like a city sidewalk.
Because I let my dog out, but I don't put him on.
Yeah, but that's at your
He's on-
house.
In your yard.
Yeah.
That's different.
That's different. This is when you take your dog off of your property.
Yep.
Even in a city playground. and
Yeah.
turn him loose.
If you take it to your friend's house, that's fine. It doesn't have to be on a leash, but
There are plenty of localities that have, leash laws. So if that's something that the city wants to
I think
impose.
he had a legitimate concern. I've got 2 dogs that are very seldom on a leash.
But they're on a shock collar.
They listen well, they have training collars on them, and they listen better than most kids, but that's a whole different story. But I do understand his concern, and I don't have a problem with us doing something like that, to keep animals controlled better in public.
I could certainly draft something up and provide it to you for your consideration.
Might be a good thing too, because we think about children at the parks.
Yeah.
You don't want a child named or hurt, that's for sure.
there was a dog biting last year in your district.
All right.
All right, we
Any
ready
other new
to,
business?
all right, ready for me?
Private, we gotta go into,
Yeah, I'm
closed
getting ready to
session.
do that.
All right.
All right.
Here we
so-
go.
All right, Tucker, you ready for this?
Yeah, persuading.
All right, council, I move that the council of the city of Covington convene in closed session pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, section 2.2-3711A8, to enter into closed meeting for discussion with legal counsel regarding outstanding building code violations, where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. Number 2, to hold discussion with legal counsel regarding possible litigation related to the Maple Avenue construction project pursuant to section 2.2-3711A7, and for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body and the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interest of the city would be adversely affected related to Jackson River Enterprises pursuant to section 2.2-3711A 3 and 6 of the Code of Virginia.
Second, unless you want to read it again.
Shut up.
All in favor?